That's okay. All right, let's get started. All right, so welcome. Hopefully you are in the right place, and so am I. Hopefully you are here for Sociology 377, which is the sociology of youth. All right, so today, depending on how things go, we're basically just introducing the course, kind of going over the syllabus, and then at the end, I'm ready to begin with the course content. I have a vote, so if you'll get to vote on whether you want to go home or start the course content. Okay, so just because I think it doesn't look like 120 people are in here. Maybe it is. Maybe it's just the room is a little big. Or 120 people registered in the course, which is big for a 300-year class, and so it makes it really hard for me to answer questions. And I get into a flow and I forget to look up, and if someone's over there in the corner and has a question, it's hard for me to remember to ask questions. So I use this system, and if you've had a class with me before, you probably recognize it. It's called Slido, and basically you go to slido.com, enter that code, or scan that QR code with your phone or tablet, and it allows you to enter questions in a Q&A. So, like this person very helpfully asking me how my summer was. It was good. It was good. I mean, when you have 3 kids, summer isn't really like relaxing. It's more like run them all over God's green earth, from summer camps to, friends' houses to my daughter started playing Dungeons and Dragons. Do I miss Enterprise? Do you mean the show Star Trek Enterprise? Do I miss Enterprise? I do miss the show Star Trek Enterprise. I wish I had gotten a full 7 seasons. Is it because of my overview picture? It's like a parenting book. Sounds interesting. Oh gosh, yeah, my parenting book. How to parent without really trying and not succeeding either. Okay, so yeah, summer's fun. All right, we'll get the silliness out of the way with the Q&A. That'll be fine. Oops. Okay, let's clear these off. Do I like jazz? No, I'm not a psychopath. Like, come on, guys. Who likes jazz? No, I'm kidding. Jazz is fine. It's not really my thing, but it's okay. All right, do I like chicken nuggets? No, not really. Rate this class out of 10. Could you believe I get this every semester? So, I mean, if you think you're being funny and original, you're really not. I have the benefit. My wife always complains about how expensive hair care products are, and my wife's hair is like super thick, and as a result, my kids are as well. And I'm like, really? I just use bar soap. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, how much does Dove cost? Like, not that much, really. Rate this class out of 10. So this class is like a child to me. So you can't rate your favorite children. But if I had to, this is amongst my favorite. It jockeys with like 2 other classes for favorite depending on the year. Although they've asked me to teach it 3 times this year. So by the end of the 3rd time, I'd be like, I never want to talk to you again. Yes, that is exactly right. I like Avatar, The Last Airbender. Thoughts on Gen Alpha? We're all doomed. To our posterity do we commit our future, and I've seen the posterity, and it thrives on brain rot. So, and nothing else. Oh my! All right, we'll talk about it as we go through. Now, don't. Okay, enough silliness. The silliness will return in a moment. Okay, if you don't know me, and I feel like at this point I teach so much stuff that almost everyone knows me somehow. My name is Jeff Broussard. I'm a teaching professor in the Department of Sociology. I also moonlight with some classes over at St. Joseph's College. So I think last year I taught 13 courses. This year I'm taking it easy and I'm only teaching 12. Really trying to cut back on the stress. Yeah, so my kind of areas of interest principally are media. Some of you had critical media studies with me this morning. Youth, and then religion. And of course, the intersection of youth and religion is sort of one of my happy places. And I have a online class running through St. Joseph's College called the Sociology of Youth and Religion, which, is always fun. Office hours by appointment. What I'm going to do, and I think it's up in this class, I think it's still a hangover from last year, so I have to make sure it's working, but I have my calendar set up so that my available times are on the calendar. So if you need an appointment with me, rather than emailing me and being like, when can we meet? And then I email you like, I'm free at this time. And then you're like, oh, well, what time of those two times would work best for you? And then we have to go back and forth 6 times by email, causing me to forget that you ever emailed me and then we never meet. There's a link on Canvas that you can click on and it will take you to my calendar and you can just select a slot. And it'll automatically put it in my calendar. So when I review my calendar in the morning, I'm like, oh, Jasmine is going to come see me today. And then I know. If you're looking for me, I am Justin Torrey in the Center for Criminological Research. And that, honestly, you go through the tunnel up to the first floor, take a left, and the Center for Criminological Research is right there. And of course, you can email me, jrb5@ualberta.ca. And if I don't answer you in 72 hours, please do feel free to forward your initial inquiry back to me if it was important. If it was unimportant, don't bother. No, if you need an answer from me and I haven't answered you in 3 business days, please do forward it again. It's probably just that I missed your email. And you know how it is, right? We're in the season where I get an email from the Faculty of Arts. I get an email from the union. I get an email from our department. The department forwards the email from the Faculty of Arts that I already looked at and deleted. And then I get like 100 other emails that are mostly just university spam. So stuff gets lost in my inbox all the time. And if I didn't answer you, it's not that I don't like you, I'm ignoring you. It's just that, honestly, it probably got pushed down. Last year, it wasn't unusual for me to get like 100 emails a day. So it can push stuff down kind of 2 whole pages in the Google Mail thing that we have. So do be persistent, right? You'll be rewarded for your persistence. I forgot that this is the slippery pen and it's flat, so it's hard to hold. You'll be rewarded for your persistence with a returned email. I generally don't answer emails on the weekend, and this is not some sort of deep philosophical work-life balance thing. I'm just really busy on the weekend. Like I said, I have 3 kids, and inevitably, starting at 9:30 in the morning on Saturday, I'm taking one to Taekwondo, and then the other one has swimming lesson, and it's just like, I don't have time to stare at, I stare at my phone at Taekwondo sometimes. But, often it's just that I'm running around and doing 100 things. So weekdays, right, Monday to Friday, if it's gone 72 hours and I haven't answered, please do follow up. Okay. So, evaluations for the course. 3 exams, 2 midterms, and a final exam. I would love to do more, but they keep making this class bigger. When I took over this class in 2015, it was 60 people, and we could do essays and all sorts of fun stuff. Over the years, it's just ballooned and ballooned and ballooned. And that's great, and it's awesome that so many people are interested in the topic, but it's limited what I can do. So you have midterms. I think I have it on the next slide, but I'll tell you now. There are 5 short answer questions on each one. And you do them through Canvas. Why? Because I hate paper. And your handwriting is terrible. I don't know you, but I know your handwriting is bad. It got to the point where a few years ago I was doing handwritten exams, and it was like I would hold them up and be like, I'm not exactly sure what's written here, so I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5. There are some words that I think I recognize, and I gave up. And I switched to E-class at the time, and then of course the university switched us over to Canvas. So you write them on Canvas, and these dates, oops, that should be October 1st, sorry. I think I went and I looked November 3rd, and I filled in October 3rd. October 1st, November 3rd, and December 16th for the exams. Now, the last couple of years, I have done the exams kind of asynchronously. Since you write them on Canvas, you don't really need to be here, and they are open book, right? So the exams are open book. Yay, open book exams, right? So the days of the exams, right? So October 1st, November 3rd. Generally speaking, I come and hang out in here in case anybody wants to write in here and has questions. If not, if you want to stay home or do it from somewhere else, you can, and most people choose to do that. Open book, no proctoring software, no exam lock. You can use your notes, all of that fun stuff. So those days you don't have to come in here. And it allows me to give you a little bit of extra time. I know it's technically cheating. Don't tell on me. Because you're only supposed to have 60 minutes or 50 minutes because it's a 50-minute class, but I generally give you 90 minutes. If you rat me out, your classmates will find out and they'll hurt you. I won't do anything. I'll be like, okay, whatever, you want to write in 50 minutes? No problem on my end. Yeah, so I generally give 90 minutes, an hour and a half to write. Gives you a little bit more space on those short answer questions than having to answer 5 in, a short answer question every 10 minutes. Which is a little bit of a blistering pace. And generally what I've done too is because, again, it's asynchronous, I leave the exams open for 24 hours, right? So you can basically write it, well, let me put it in 24-hour time just to be perfectly clear, from midnight to 23:59 hours, right? So you have the entire day. Once you start, you have 90 minutes, right? Once you open it, the clock starts ticking and all of that. So that's what the exams look like. They're pretty straightforward and they're non-cumulative, so they cover each about a third of the course. Okay, I'll see how many words are the short answer questions. I always struggle whether I should even answer this question. Generally speaking, somewhere between 250, 350 words is a good answer. I don't have a specific word count in the sense that sometimes people answer it in less and they do a good job. Sometimes people go a little bit over and I don't want them, freaking out to delete 25 words out of an answer because they're at 375. But yeah, generally between 250 and 350. The questions are fairly involved. And because, we're a third-year course, it is, yeah, it's a third-year course. It's open book. I do expect a fair bit of detail. And I'll give you examples, right? Well, before we get to the exam, we're going to talk through some examples. And you can, hopefully feel very comfortable. And I will give you examples of like, okay, this is an answer that gets like a 10 or a 9. This is one that gets an 8 or a 7, a 6 or a 5, and hopefully none of you fall below 6 or 5. So I won't find you one that's like a 4 or 3. But I'll give you kind of examples of what different answers look like in terms of, I just said that, in terms of the detail that you need to get the full grades, right? So again, word count isn't as important as content. But generally speaking, right, if you're answering these short answer questions in 113 words, there's not going to be enough detail to get a good mark. But again, I will show you examples with an example of what would be a question, what would be an answer that gets you that 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, well, not the 4, 3. Okay. Ooh, that's a good question. How many words in the short answer? Okay, I answered you. Do I care about spelling or grammar? No, not for our purposes here, right? I'm not going to worry too much. As long as I can understand what you're saying, right? So do keep that in mind. If the grammar is so bad that I have no idea what you're trying to say, then that's going to be a problem. If you act like my son and you write instead of what, I will dock a mark for that. I don't know why. It's just, I've been trying to teach him when he text messages me, I'm like, could you please use whole words? Like, I know it sounds the same and it's apparently faster. How much faster is one fewer letters? I don't know. He just got his phone. It's a travesty. I've made terrible mistakes as a parent. Honestly, as long as it's comprehensible, you know, that's fine. When it gets into the territory of I have no idea what you're trying to say, we do end up with problems, right? So there you go. Clear. All right. Yes, actually, I think the example questions might already be on Canvas and available to you. I will double check. Do I have Canvas open right now? Ta-da, right here. Yes, if you look at the bottom, there's practice material. The other thing I'll do, it's already there. You can already look at what some of the questions might look like. I will make sure those aren't worth any marks. I have to do a quick edit on that. So yes, I've already provided you with example questions. The class before the exam, we will go over some, right? And we will look at them together and I will walk you through again what the kind of different levels of kind of answer are and what it's going to get you in terms of grades. I'm going to answer the textbook question after marking. Do I give part marks, 0.5, 0.75? Generally, I'll give 0.5s. Very rarely, I would give a 0.25 or a 0.75. Most of the time, they're whole numbers, but it depends, right? 9.75, just to make you, work a little harder on the next exam to just really get that extra 0.25, because, I'll just torment you with a 9.75. That'll be my play this semester. It's like, you were so close. If only you'd added a comma right there. No, I'm kidding. Generally speaking, it's like half marks, not quarter and 3/4 marks. Unless something happens and I think you're really in a funny spot. Okay, what else? Are you expected to include outside sources, not lectures? You're not expected to, but you can, right? I've definitely had people bring in content from other courses. The one thing I will just caution you about a little bit is if you're gonna do that, just tell me what the source is. It doesn't have to be like a proper citation. They're exams, they're timed, it's quick. I'm not expecting you to go through and give me like a properly formatted APA citation. If you want to be like, hey, I learned this in Psych 372, as if anyone learns anything in a psych class. Sorry. Oh, I'm mean and I don't like psychology. You'll catch on. Just tell me about it. Like, tell me that you learned something in your psychology class. Don't just drop it in there. The biggest problem being it's increasingly hard to tell the difference between random stuff that ChatGPT made up or is drawing from a weird spot or pre-existing knowledge. So that could get you like docked a mark potentially. So just tell me where it's coming from and then we got no problems. However, if you just like drop in something, especially if it's like a really high level theory, I get this a lot in sociology of religion. The chatbots like to cite really, really obscure like literature, which I know, but at the same time, I'm like, I guarantee you don't know that. So just be careful and tell me where it's coming from and we'll be fine. That almost looks like English. I mean, technically my last name should have a capital letter, but who's counting? And when you write for real, shouldn't you capitalize both letters? I don't know. All right, I don't know. Okay. I'm hesitant. So technically speaking, yes, I am recording and streaming this lecture onto my YouTube channel. I'm always a little hesitant to do this, and I'll tell you why. Some students really like it as a tool, right? They like to pause me or something. Maybe I talk too fast, or I'm a little bit too erratic. I don't know. Or I spew too many facts, whatever. That said, what I have found is, if you want to know about like general academic performance, since I started streaming, and it's not as bad in this class as some others, but it's kind of done this, right? And, you know, because I use YouTube Analytics, what generally happens to the YouTube videos is the 2 days before, like, they're like this. It's like, oh, 4 people were watching it. Or 3. Oh, it's the day before the exam. Right? It's like, wow, so many views in the couple days before the exam. I don't mind putting it out there. I honestly don't know if it helps students. And I will put a link to it on eClass. I still encourage you to come, or at least if you're going to watch them live so you can ask questions. I find that people that time shift the lectures and wait till the last minute, right? We cover a lot of material. There's a lot of material in the course. It can get somewhat dense at times, and if you're trying to cram it into the 2 or 3 days before the exam, and I know you're like, I'm not going to do that, but you will. And I know you will. And deep down in the cockles of your heart, you know you will too, because something's going to come up in week 3. You're going to have an assignment in your lab in psychology for some reason. And you're going to be like, oh, I'll just skip 377 this week. And 1 week will turn into 2, which will turn into 3. And then all of a sudden, it's the exam, and you're trying to catch up on 3 weeks of content, and you just ran out of Red Bull or something, right? So I would encourage you to still come. I know once the first snow comes, October 4th, or whatever day it is, you know, people stop coming to campus altogether. I'd still encourage you to come, or if you're going to tune in, you can watch it live on the YouTube channel. I'll create a playlist. You just have to kind of jump into it. But don't let it lag behind, right? Don't be one of those people that's driving up the curve. And I will say, people will watch it, they'll like watch like 15 minutes out of a 50-minute lecture. And they're like, I got this. And it generally doesn't go that well. And like I said, I've seen the grades kind of slipping over a few years with more people in that kind of B-C range than before I started streaming. So it is there, but you know, use it wisely. Okay, other questions. Will we be doing anything for Halloween? Do we have a class on Halloween? You're adults. Halloween is for kids. My daughter's in her first year of high school, and she's like, I don't know what I'm going to be for Halloween. I'm like, how about the person who stays home and hands out candy? And she's like, no, it's fun. I'm going with my friends. I'm like, uh-huh. I had very strict parents, and like after the 6th grade, there's like, you're too old for trick-or-treating. And I never trick-or-treated again, and I never will. Okay. Have I answered? Do you have to hit that like and subscribe button? No, but if you could go buy a pair of Raycon earbuds and use the code Dr. B. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I would never be sponsored by Raycon earbuds. It'd be something random like birch gold or something. You need to buy physical gold. I don't know. All right. Last question here. All right. Is there a textbook required? No, I jettisoned the textbook for this course 2 years ago. And then I was approached by the publisher being like, why you don't want to buy our textbook anymore? And it was because it was over, like I think it was published in 2014, so it's super out of date. There are really no good textbooks for sociology of youth on the market. And I know because I look every single year and they're all terrible. And I got to review one for the publisher, and my recommendation was don't publish this, it's garbage. I won't tell you why, but it was bad. The focus was very like, at one point they referenced the new social media platform Snapchat. And I was like, oh, This is an old book that you updated, but you didn't update that part. Uh, wow, that comment is lagging behind hard. Should I spoil the work unit where I tell you what that degree gets you? No, I won't. Don't worry, sociology is not much better. When am I writing my own textbook? When the department stops giving me 8 courses to teach a year and I have, 5 minutes to put together. And plus, apparently there's no market for it. I'm just teasing. Psychology is fine. I guess, sort of, kind of. Okay, so no textbook. There are readings, every week. How to put this? Because I don't want to be telling you not to do the readings. The readings are really good. I've picked them out for a reason. That said, right, I do think of them as sort of supplemental, right? Not the core of the course, right? The core of the course is the lectures, and the readings are to help you out, to help you with a greater understanding, to give you more context and all of that fun stuff. Definitely are super useful for putting things into your exams, but you don't 100% have to read every single one of them. And the thing that I'm not going to do, because we're not doing multiple choice, is ask you, really, really specific questions about stuff that's hidden in those readings that, I won't have talked about in class. So, I'm trying to make it easy for you. The lecture is the core piece, so do with that what you will. Okay. How am I doing for time? Oh, 27 minutes. Not too bad. Well, I have used 27 minutes. Okay, so the course. Basically, we're looking at youth as a social category and as a kind of a social construct, right? And we're going to start off the course, right? I'll spoil it for you a little bit by kind of delving into this concept of youth, and at least in a kind of Western concept where it came from, right? Because, it has changed over time and it's still changing, right? For the most part, right, if you had lived 100 years ago, you would have all not been considered youth anymore, right? And most of you are, quite young, late teens, early 20s. You would have been, married probably farming or working in a factory. You would have been in a very different place than you are today because youth ended at a very different point in most people's lives. Today, we can kind of talk about youth as being people between, if we're being generous, let's say between like 12 and probably about 29, right? So we've extended this further and further as time has gone on. And that's largely a function of technology, of economics, and a bunch of other things that have changed the way, we can see how we move through life, and how we conceive of what a young person is, right? When most people don't live past 45, youth means something quite different. Okay, so we'll look at how, the concept is constructed, where it came from, and how it affects people in this category. And then a big part, or a big chunk of the course is a bunch of topics, right? So, if I kind of look through the 3 parts, and some of these may move around, from part 1 to part 2, and so on, we're going to look at a bunch of different topics that have to do with youth, right? So we're going to talk about, we're going to start talking about the history of youth and childhood, where these concepts came from, and how we came to have our kind of modern understanding of them. And then we're going to look at, basically going back to the middle, I guess the first quarter of the 20th century, so about 1925, and we're going to take this all the way to the present day, so 2025, right? So we're going to look at about 100 years of youth based on generations. So we're going to go from, the silents, the boomers, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, objectively the best generation of all, Gen Z, and maybe we'll talk about, Gen Alpha. We're starting to get a bit of information about Gen Alpha. The big problem with Gen Alpha is they're too young for most social science research, so we still don't know a ton about them. We're going to kind of zoom through these different generations and talk about what some of their characteristics were, how those characteristics were shaped by their cultural and historical context, and all of that fun stuff. And then we're going to go into kind of our like more, I guess, staccato topics. We'll talk about education, right? How education affects them and what it looks like, why everybody's getting more, and all that fun stuff. These two may switch around. Work and families. Work, what does youth work look like? And I'm just kind of trying to piece together some new material, because in the last maybe like 5 years, youth work, especially in Canada, has changed a whole lot because of, principally economic trends. To spoil it, what should have been a golden age for young workers today, based on demographics, has actually become kind of a horror show with really high youth unemployment. And this is principally driven by government policy and economics. But we'll talk about that later. I'll talk about how things have changed. I'm adding some things to that unit. And then, we'll talk about families, which used to be the course's most boring unit. And then last year, I revolutionized it to be what I think is one of the more interesting ones. So we're going to talk about things like marriage. Specifically, why no one gets married anymore, right? And what does that mean? What does that look like? We'll talk about, children, fertility and children. Why don't people have kids anymore, right? We're ostensibly, if you talk to a demographer, in something of a fertility crisis, where people are having so few children that, it's going to cause a bunch of social dislocation and problems. What else is in there? Marriage, fertility, relationships. What relationships look like. We'll talk a little bit about why men suck. I'm kidding. But we'll talk about, a concept called marriageability, right? And the fact that, increasingly more and more people are going to be single for their entire lives, depending on who you talk to. For women, it's somewhere between 20 and 40% who are never going to be married. Up to like between 30 and 40% of women in Gen Z that'll probably never have children. And again, I'm joking that men suck. They only suck if you go on dating apps or out in public. I'm kidding. I'm old, so I can make jokes about younger people. But definitely, there's challenges coming, and young men, in some ways, have changed. They're a little bit different than they used to be, and this is causing some dislocations between men and women and making it really hard. Amongst the things that we'll talk about in there is there's a political shift happening amongst men globally. Men and women, right? Women are becoming much more progressive and liberal. Men are becoming much more conservative. And we'll try to figure out what, if anything, that means. It's all Andrew Tate's fault, I think. That's what I've been told. I kid. I don't know who that is. No, I do. He's the bald British guy who says offensive things. As opposed to me, the bald Canadian guy who says nothing but true sociological things. We'll talk a little bit about religion and spirituality amongst young people. And again, this is one of my happy places. It's a really interesting topic, so much so that I, took this course, this unit in this course, and built out an entire one semester class on youth and religion. We'll try to give you some highlights as to what's happening with youth and religion amongst young people. And it's quite a bit different than what you might think, right? We'll talk sex and intimacy. So we're going to talk about, I'm sure something you want to talk about in class. We'll talk about porn. We'll talk about dating, and we'll talk about there's a third part of this. Oh, yeah. What Mark Rigneris calls, cheap sex, and why this might be a problem. Okay, and it's a fun unit as well. Always very tastefully done. I'll tell you some stories about doing the porn unit, and I've never show porn, I promise. But just having in large letters porn up on the board and people walking into the room and being a little disoriented. I have some fun stories. I also, my master's supervisor is one of the top porn scholars in North America. That is a thing. if you can imagine. Her name is Rebecca Sullivan. She teaches at the University of Calgary. So, for me, it wasn't shocking, but other people are like, oh my gosh, we're talking about pornography in school? We'll talk a little bit about crime, right? So we'll talk a little bit about crime. It's not necessarily my area of specialization, but we'll tell you a little bit about what's going on with youth crime. And then, some topics to kind of close things out. I meant to put this in last year and I never got to it. Hopefully I can get to it this time. This question of whether there's a crisis of boys and men, because there's been a slate of sociological books in the last maybe 10 years that have asserted that there is a crisis of boys and men, that they're not thriving. And I think the evidence for this is pretty overwhelming. But the reasons and what might be a solution to it, is more complex than I think what we imagine, right? And you can think here of Richard Reeves and Hannah Rosen. Reeves wrote, I think he wrote Of Boys and Men, and Hannah Rosen wrote a book called The End of Men. And they're both really interesting, and I think they speak to young people and the way young men and boys in particular are struggling. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about youth and health. Really, it's mental health. It's bad. But we'll go through the statistics and see what's going on with particularly Gen Z and how they're different, from other generational cohorts, because there are some significant differences. And then, I'll try and figure out where that's coming from. And we end kind of talking about youth and technology. And here I'll take work from, Jean Twenge and from Jonathan Haidt, both of whom, have done significant work on smartphones and what smartphones do to young people. And, I do think it's really interesting. They're names that have, they've written some best-selling sociology books in the last few years, and I try to bring in as much of that as I can. So on the whole, I think, the content is really fun. There's lots to look forward to. I leave the really juicy stuff, these 3 units for the end, just so I have something to look forward to. Hopefully you do as well. But all of it, I think, is really fun, and it's an interesting, hopefully, and stuff that almost every unit in this course, I've had someone at some point tell me that this messed with their understanding of the world. So, hopefully that tells you something useful. Okay, this is my obligatory slide. Honestly, if you need something from me, right? If there's something that I am doing that's driving you crazy, or something I'm not doing that I could easily do to help you out, do let me know. Sometimes, I don't know what your learning needs are. When I did my undergrad, laptops were like the purview of the incredibly wealthy, right? It was the rich kids that had laptops. Nobody else did. I did all of my notes with pen and paper. So I am a horse of a different color, and that color is old. So if there's something that's like, Gen Z learning needs that I'm not doing, please let me know. I can't accommodate every request. I got the one request which is like, I would learn better if I knew I was getting an A in this class. I'm like, sure you would. So I can't accommodate everything, but if it's reasonable, I can do that. I think the first one I ever got after I put this slide up was like, would you stop using colorful backgrounds? I print my notes and you're killing my printer. So, black and white is good. Yeah, so just let me know. Okay. Do you need to, all right. What's the average grade for the exams and the class? Okay, let's clear this. Let me answer a few questions. We probably won't have time to do anything today. Do you need to cite the readings on the exam for full marks? No, I said like no citation. You don't have time. I'm not expecting that. You should make clear where the information comes from. For that, the average in the class. So, generally speaking, on the first midterm, the average is somewhere between 76 and 82. It drops substantially for the second midterm, usually somewhere between 72 and 78, and then comes up a little bit, usually just just between like 78 and 81 for the final exam. And generally, people do pretty well on the first one because they've worked really hard, and then they get busy or slack off for the second one. And then they pick it back up for the final exam. So that is and I think that I'm always within that range that the Faculty of Arts says. It's usually somewhere in the mid to high B for the class average. So I've never had it go above the range that the department says we have to have. And I've never tried to lower it or raise it either. My rank in Rocket League, I am terrible. I'm gold 3. 2 right now. I'm not a good Rocket League player. My son just tells me, you need to practice more. I'm like, dude, I have a life and a job. I don't have time to practice Rocket League like you. Do you have to remember names for the exams? No. Do you know why? It's open book. You don't have to remember anything. You just have to have good notes. Do I think brain rot is frying kids' brain? Yes. That's not a hard one. Any religions in particular that fascinate you and how they interact with youth? I mean, I will say Christianity is my area of interest, particularly because I'm interested in Canadian and American youth, principally, and that's generally been a Christian kind of background. Evangelicalism, like Christian evangelicalism, evangelical Protestantism, I find just truly fascinating in general because, and if you take social religion with me next semester, I will show you, they're just different. They're different kinds of people. I think I was looking at a Cardis survey over the summer of Canadian people, and your faith is very important to you. Catholics was like 42%, mainline Protestants was like 30%, and evangelicals was like 82%. They're just different people. So I find them just endlessly fascinating, and they're much fodder for good. For good scholarship. Labubus are clearly demonic. They're clearly the spawns of Satan. My opinion on Mormons, I mean, that's complicated. I think Mormonism's fascinating. It's the first truly global religion founded probably since the birth of Islam. And it has some really interesting kind of demographic and sociological characteristics. That said, I read the Book of Mormon and I can't understand why anyone finds it compelling, but that's just me. I'm Roman Catholic, right? I grew up Roman Catholic. I'm still Roman Catholic. Why don't we talk about exams later? But I think I'll give you some general. Have I ever tried Dubai chocolate? No. Is it safe? I do try. How often do I think about the Roman Empire? Oh, daily. I mean, you have to think about the Roman Empire daily, right? Like, honestly, we're gonna start this course next time. I would guess what we're gonna talk about. We're gonna talk about the Roman Empire at least once. So yeah, no, I think about Rome a lot. Again, being Roman Catholic, kind of makes that inevitable. I do try to pronounce the names of religion properly. I'm still working on Sikh because I think it's sick, but it just doesn't stick in my brain and I forget. All right, so how would I recommend studying for this class? I'd say take good notes and organize things so that when it comes to putting them on a short answer test, you have a quick cheat sheet it's not cheating because it's open book, but you don't have to go through the slides, right? So take good notes and condense them in such a way as you can move information into a short answer question really efficiently. All right, well, I was gonna ask you if you want to continue, but we only have 5 minutes left. So that was fun. Why don't we come back on Friday and we'll talk about the Roman Empire.